Welcome to the newest episode of Burning Boxes and Breaking Chains, a podcast built around accountability. Today we're going to be talking about It's My Fault, and I'm going to be joined by my friend Mark Matteson. And let me read you a little bit about who Mark is. He started his career as an HVAC technician in 1976, and he's one of those rare professionals who can say he's a publisher, international speaker, consultant, podcaster, TEDx speaker, best-selling author, and mean it. He's attracted clients in HVAC, distribution, and manufacturing from multiple organizations like Microsoft, T-Mobile, John Deere, Conoco, Aflac, New York Mutual Life, Amazon, and Fortune 500 companies on 3 different continents. Pretty impressive. His annual speaking is about 40 keynotes, 20 seminars, workshops, 5 to 10 consulting engagements. As a committed writer, Mark has written 8 books, including the international bestseller, Freedom from Fear. Sold over 250,000 copies. He's also the author of popular ebooks, Lessons in Leadership, Presenting Like a Pro, Sales Success Strategies, Customer Service Excellence, and his monthly e-newsletter goes out to 8,900 people a month since 2003. He posts and comments on LinkedIn. He's been frequently interviewed and quoted in the media and has written hundreds of articles for dozens of magazines. Considered a very well-thought leader, idea reporter, and agent of change who teaches clients how to get more of the right things done in less time. Everything's something we all need. He's started working internationally in Australia, Canada, Aruba, Mexico, and Turkey. And been working in 48 different states. He resides in Gold Bar, Washington with his wife of 46 years, Debbie, and they have 3 grown sons and 5 grandchildren. I love this. So Mark takes great pride in the fact that he flunked high school English. Everybody, welcome my friend Mark Matteson. Good to see
Great
you,
to
brother.
be here. Thanks, Jeff. I appreciate you. And my mom wrote that bio. She loves me.
Did she really? Oh, man,
No.
I wish mine was around to write me one today. She passed 3 years ago. So,
Sorry.
yeah. It's good, though. I mean, dementia is a thing I would not wish on my worst enemies.
Yeah.
Because they don't know they have it and everybody else suffers because of it.
My dad went that way. I understand.
Yep. I mean, it's amazing how many people I run into that can relate. So I want to know, though, what is this about flunking English, man?
I had 36 absences in 6th period English my sophomore year.
That'll flunk you.
Well, I discovered beer and Barb Sadler at the same time. So why? And it was the warmest May in the history of Seattle. So why would I go to class? So
Well, that's the nice thing about growing up in Florida, man. That was my claim to fame in my driver's ed class in high school. It was 30 days in the semester. I missed 26 days of class and still passed with a C because I knew how to drive. I've been driving since I was like 10. So let me ask you a question, Mark. Has there been a time in your life where you recognized it's my fault and it changed everything?
Yeah, and I'll tell you a story. So 2 guys are having lunch in a construction site. And the first guy opens up his lunchbox and says, "Meatloaf sandwich. I hate meatloaf." And his friend smiles and doesn't say anything and they eat in silence. Second day, he opens up his lunchbox, goes, "Meatloaf again, for the love of Pete. I hate meatloaf." And his friend kind of laughs it off and doesn't say anything and they eat in silence. Third day, he opens up his lunchbox, goes, "Meatloaf again. I think I'm going to lose it." Finally, his friend can't stand it. He said, "Buddy, why don't you just have your wife make you something other than meatloaf?" He said, "My wife? I make my own lunch." I love that story because it turns out I make my own lunch too, and I'm sure you do as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I'm 100% accountable for my actions and decisions.
Yep. That's the one thing that made a difference for me many, many years ago when I was a teenager, when I was, not doing the right thing all the time. And I looked at my dad for help one time and he said, "You got yourself in this mess, get yourself out of it."
Wow.
So I had to figure it out. And I did.
He
And
threw the
since
ball
then-
back to you.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. That's why when this podcast, the first episode I launched was last Friday, would have been my dad's 85th birthday. And he was the one that held me accountable. And accountability is everything in the world today. And there's so many people, I don't think they even know how to spell the word or pronounce it correctly, even down to, and one of my biggest pet peeves is shopping carts at Costco in the parking lots. I'm like, dude, if you can't be accountable for that little thing, you can't be accountable for the big stuff. It's just not going to happen.
It's the ice tray in the freezer. Fill it back up.
Yeah. I see the stuff. Yeah, you're right. I see the stuff sitting around the store that change your mind. And it's like, go put it back.
Yeah.
That's one of my favorite stories with my wife. I was in a, I'll call it Wally World to keep them off the thing. And the lady in front of me, she pulls her cart up. She steps in front of me. She unloads her stuff on the belt. And she gets her stuff bagged up. She only had a few items. And she started to walk away. And I couldn't get to the register because of her cart. I said, excuse me. I said, is this yours? And she got all flustered. She goes, oh. And she started to put it at the end of the aisle, at the end of the cash register. I said, that ain't where that damn thing goes either. And then she really got flustered. And the little girl behind the counter, behind the register, started to laugh. She said, where do I put it? I said, try over by the door where you picked it up. And it's like, come on, people. Everybody thinks it's so easy to say somebody else will take care of it.
Right.
So easy.
It's not rocket science. Just do the right thing.
Really not. So what are some other areas in your life that helped you propel, especially being the book writer? I mean, I'm trying to catch up to you. I haven't done a TEDx. I'm now starting a podcast. I've written one book. I'm working on another one. And but some of the things that you started holding yourself accountable that made the difference in your life.
Well, I think first and foremost, for me in November '79, my girlfriend at the time, who later became my wife, said, you drink a lot. And I said, and your point is? She said, could you slow down? I said, no, I could stop. And she said, if you do, I will. And she didn't have to. She didn't have a problem. But that literally changed my life. I said, I'm going to do this thing. I give it up. I surrender. And that was November '79. I mean, back then it was disco. Now it's Costco. Back then I had long hair. Now I'm longing for hair.
Yeah. Oh, I hear you, man. Yeah. Mine's going in the bag.
Yeah. No, I have no sympathy for you. You have way too much for a guy your age. So I
appreciate that.
When I go to the barber, I say, how about those Seahawks? And 30 seconds later, he says, next. And I go to give him a tip. He said, no, I couldn't. That'd be stealing. Trim the ears. He means inside.
Wow.
So I went to my 40-year high school reunion, and this woman said, you've lost some hair since high school. I said, that's a bald-faced lie. I have the same amount I had in high school. It just moved around a little in my ears and my nose and on my back. So she left me alone.
So now the thing that I look at with me is holding myself, and it doesn't matter what it is. It could be, in the airport or in the grocery store. You have to be accountable for your actions no matter where you go. Because I can't put that on somebody else. There's one thing that somebody pointed out to me many years ago when I was doing the blame game. When you're pointing one at somebody else, you got three pointing back at you.
Amen.
And I'm like, oh my gosh. I run it. Looks like we had a glitch. Said, how did I ever get through life blaming other people? It's not their fault, And one of the biggest things that made a difference to me was the poem, The Man in the Glass.
Yes.
That everybody can pat you on the back as you pass, but the man in the glass tell you're a bum if you can't look him in the eye. And I couldn't.
He's the one to please, never mind all the rest. He's with you right down to the end. And you pass your most dangerous and difficult test if the man in the glass is your friend.
You know it well, my brother. I've got a copy of it that I folded up and had in my wallet for years. I cut it out of a newspaper. I think that's where I ran into it. It was in a newspaper. And I cut it out and carried it with me for years. This old and yellow, you know what newspaper print looks like from back in the early 80s or late 70s. That's it. And I still got it to this day. And that made one of the biggest impacts on me about it. I have to take accountability in my dealings with people. And that's one of the things I'm doing tomorrow morning is a podcast or a webinar with SCORE, which is a small business administration.
Right.
And it's called having a conversation rather than a confrontation. That's been my biggest thing, because if you look at the DISC profiles, I'm an I. Everything else is below zero. I am just strictly an I, and they list me as a communicator, and that's what I love to do is communicate with people.
Me too.
And then a lot of times it's like, you have a conversation, not a confrontation. So you have to stop and think. The first words that come out of your mouth is going to determine which way that goes.
Right.
And if it goes south, it's your fault because you used the wrong words to start that conversation. It's like asking somebody, hey, can you walk me through your thought process on how you came to this decision? Goes way better than what the hell were you thinking?
Yeah. What do you say to yourself to make it okay?
Yeah, that's a good one. And one of my favorite ones is I say, that uncommunicated expectations breed premeditated resentments.
Yes.
That could be on either side. I said that one time on a webinar on a mastermind class I was in, and one of the ladies, she said, "What do you mean you don't know what I didn't tell you?" I'm like, that's the simplified version right there. How can you expect them to act a certain way or behave a certain way if you didn't tell them what you expected?
I was on a flight, Jeff, and we were on the tarmac for like an hour, and there was a long delay. And this woman across the aisle, and I was sitting in first class, and this is long delay, and let's just call her Karen, and I don't know what her name was, but she was just complaining and going on and on and on, and I couldn't stand it any longer. And I finally said, 150 years ago, it took us 6 months to go this far, and half of us died along the way. I said, are you going to have to watch another movie? Are you going to be okay? And no one clapped, but you could literally see everyone around me going, oh, thank God somebody said something. And I was a little hesitant to say anything, but I couldn't take it anymore, right? Because she was just going on and on and on about, all the... So I'm 100% accountable for my actions and decisions. And every once in a while, I just have to say something. And let me just make another distinction. A friend of mine said, man, you're really disciplined. And I never considered myself that way. Not really. Because when I was younger, I never finished anything I ever started. Didn't finish college, didn't finish the Air Force. And then one day I said, I need to start finishing what I start. And so my discipline for writing, when I'm writing a new book or an ebook, is 3 pages a day or 1 hour, whichever comes first. And I do it every day until I'm done. Then I click save and I wait 3 weeks and then I print it out and then I start editing. And I'm not a very good editor. My wife does most of the editing for me and then I hire a professional to finish it up. But I'm a pretty good writer and I'm pretty disciplined in that way. And my point is, whatever it is, whatever project you're working on, make a list of what.
Somehow you got bumped, brother.
Was my flow of consciousness interrupted?
Your video was. I don't know about your flow of consciousness.
Well,
you were talking about your book, and
just as well. I got a face for radio, so.
Oh, that's all right. Mine too.
So I don't
go ahead. I'll clip it back together. So you were talking about your discipline, writing your book, and the editing and stuff. So
yeah, so it's 3 pages a day or 1 hour, whichever comes first, and I do it every day until it's done. And it couldn't be more simple. Not easy per se, but it is really, really simple. And I kind of learned that from Stephen King in his book on writing. He writes 4 hours. 10 pages or 4 hours, whichever comes first. And I thought, well, I have other things going on. I don't have 4 hours. So I chose an hour and I get up at 5 a.m. and at 5:30 I start writing and at 6:30 I'm done, regardless of how many pages I actually get through. And some days I did 3 or 4 or 5 pages. Other days I get 1 or 2. But it's the discipline.
Yep.
It's the commitment. And it doesn't matter what you do. Do first things first, one thing at a time, and finish what you start.
Very
simple.
True. I saw a quote not too long ago that said, discipline is the greatest form of self-love you can have.
Boy, that's so true.
Absolutely is.
I'm the kind of guy I'd like to spend the rest of my life with,
You know, it's funny you say that. I was doing a talk over in Tampa for a group of national speakers, and I asked them, I said, how many of you guys can list 4 or 5 people, right off the top of your head that you respect, and you trust? And they all said, yeah. And then we kept talking. I said, hey, back to that list. How many of you put yourself on that list? And I got deer in the headlight look.
Yeah.
I said, yep, I'm at the top of my list.
Yeah.
Because I look myself in the eye every morning, and I'm the one that's living in my head every day more than anybody else. So that's one of the key things. And I've started recently asking people when I do a presentation, do I have their permission to have a straightforward and honest conversation? That way, if they get uncomfortable, it's not on me. You told me I could have this conversation with you.
You said it was okay. Yeah.
Exactly. You said it was okay. I said, and the bad thing is, I said, it may make some of you uncomfortable. And I said, but uncomfortable is good, because maybe then you can start changing whatever that behavior is. I asked that group too. I said, well, how many of you consider yourself a responsible person and went through things like paying your bills on time and putting up dishes, or, picking up your trash? And everybody's like, yep, yep, yep. I said, how many of you put the shopping cart back at Costco? And I heard groans in the class. And I'm like, there you go. You're not a responsible person. You're fooling yourself.
Well, I got to be honest,
dismiss the little stuff, man. You can start dismissing big stuff too.
I got to be honest. I don't take it all the way back to the store. I put it in the little rack where all the other ones are.
That's fine. I don't take mine all the way back to the store either, but I don't prop it up for somebody to run into it with their car either, or just leave it floating willy-nilly around the parking lot.
That's really a rock in your shoe, isn't it? Yeah.
Oh yeah, it really is, man. Because especially at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, if you pull up in the Costco here in Winter Park, there's probably 300 of those things just propped everywhere around the parking lot. And that little corral you're talking about is less than 10 yards away from most of them.
Right.
I'm like, come on now. But then again, I mean, you look at prejudging other people and their behaviors, but sometimes I have to stop myself too. And it's my fault if I'm getting upset about that. It's my fault. I have to look at it. You never know what they're going through, especially when you see people speeding, cutting through traffic. I mean, who knows? Family member could have been in an accident and they're rushing to get there. I don't know what their story is. So I try my best not to judge, but I still do.
When I was a brand new sales rep selling commercial service agreements and projects in Seattle, I had cold called a particular building, and I got the owner's name and his phone number, and I called him and I set up an appointment for the following week. And the day comes, I called him to confirm because it was a bit of a drive from the office. And he goes, who? What? No, just forget the whole thing. And he hung up. And I thought, wow, I didn't know how I'd offended him. And I literally didn't know what to do. So I waited 24 hours. And then I thought, okay, I don't know what's going on with him, but I think I better call him back. And I waited a couple more days. And then on the third day, I called him and I said, hey, listen, if I offended you in some way, I just want to say I'm sorry. And can we reschedule? He goes, oh, you called me 3 days ago. I said, yeah. He said, that was the day I found out my wife had just died. He said, so honestly, I don't even remember what I said to you, but let's just push this off for a few weeks, maybe a month. I said, take as much time as you need. And to your point, we have no idea what somebody else is going through. We'd have to have some measure of compassion and empathy and not take ourselves too seriously.
I tell people all the time, I said, I don't take myself too seriously because I know I'm not getting out of this game alive anyway. Not going to happen. That's part of the I personality that I have too. But I've got a coin that I carry with me that says nothing, absolutely nothing happens in this world by mistake. Every person, place, thing, and situation is exactly the way it's supposed to be at this moment. And acceptance is the answer to all my problems.
Page 417, Dr. Paul O. I got to meet him, actually.
Did you really?
Yes, sir. My brother, his band was playing at this speakers meeting. And so I helped him set up the microphone and all the speakers and so on. And I set it up for 6-7, which is where it belongs. And this little old guy came walking up and he moved it down to 5-7 where he thought it belonged. And he started telling his story. And I didn't know who this guy was. And he started talking. And the longer he talked, pretty soon I was looking around for something to write with, taking notes, because this guy was amazing. And finally I said, who was that guy? And he goes, oh, that's Dr. Paul O. He wrote Dr. Alcoholic Addict in the big book, Alcoholics Anonymous. I go, he's that guy? They said, yeah, I know. Dr. Paul O. Who knew?
Wow. Well, let me ask you, if you had some advice for the people that are going to be listening to this, because it's going to go out on my channels through Facebook, LinkedIn, and a bunch of stuff with John Maxwell and the National Speakers Association. If you had some advice for them on things that they could do to start holding themselves accountable and looking at it, it's my fault, what would that be? I know that's an open-ended question.
It is.
Loaded.
Well, first and foremost, be true to yourself and do what you love, do what you have a passion for. You obviously are following that path. In 1997, I went on this journey. And then take what you do seriously. Don't take yourself seriously, but take your work seriously. Mm-hmm. And I do something called the Hour of Power. I figure out what my number one goal is for the year, and I find a book that's in alignment with that particular goal. Let's just say it's sales. So I'll read for 20 minutes in sales every morning. So that's the first 20 minutes of that hour. The second 20 minutes, I sit down and I think about the goal. I rewrite it at the top of the page of my journal, and I think about the why and the how, and I just think. George Bernard Shaw said, I become rich and famous by thinking a couple of times a week. He said, most people don't think. They memorize, but that's not the same thing. And the third thing I do is I plan my day. What are the 6 most important things I need to do today? And I only do 6 because I used to have one of those day timers, and I would write down 14 things that I needed to get done that day, and I never got more than 6 done. So I came to the simple conclusion that 6 was my sweet spot. That was a good number.
There you go.
And then I came across a story by a guy named Ivy Lee. Charles Schwab was the president of U.S. Steel, and he hired Lee as a consultant in 1927 to help him be more effective. And Lee said, look, grab a legal pad and a pencil. I want you to write down the 6 most important things you need to do today. So he wrote it down. He said, now estimate how long you think each of those tasks is going to take. And he did that. He said, now, if you were going out of town for 30 days, you could only do one of those things. Which one's number 1? Of the 5 remaining, which one's number 2? And so on. And once you're done with the list, when you come into work tomorrow, do the first things first, one thing at a time, and finish what you start. He said, once you're convinced of its efficacy, teach it to have your managers do it for 30 days. Then send me a check for whatever you think the idea is worth. And in 1927, Ivy Lee, 60 days later, got a check for $25,000. Wow. Which is $250,000 in today's money. Mm-hmm. He said, Schwab said, because it was the single most important business idea I'd ever come across. And so I do that hour of power, read, think, plan every single day. And if you do that, it's not if you're going to reach your goals, it's when.
That's the thing, when you look at that everything happens for a reason. Sometimes it's not in your timing,
Right.
You have to be, and that's where the acceptance comes in. But if you're constantly putting that one foot in front of the other, instead of going backwards, just keep going towards that goal.
Yeah.
That was the thing when I started making changes and being accountable to myself many years ago. People were shocked because I walked away from a ton of people in my life. I did not want to go back to that lifestyle. I had to walk away from them. And that's one of the things with my dad. He told me, he said, you don't need to be doing all that. And I looked at him one day and I said, Pop, I said, no offense. I said, but you have no idea that when I was 15, I damn near ate a bullet. I said, I'm not going back to that person for you or anybody else. And it was the last time we talked about that. He just knew that I wasn't doing that. I'm not going back to being that person, and I love it when people say, oh, well, you can't do that. Yeah, I'm at the point now. It's like, yeah, hide and watch. I'm going to do it twice and take pictures,
Right. Well, and you're going to be the same person in 5 years, except for 2 things: the people you associate with and the books that you read.
That's why I thought about you for this podcast, man, because I remember you telling me that when we first met, and you realized that was 8 years ago. You and I met in New Orleans.
When we were young and having a good time, time flew. Now it flies whether we're having a good time or not.
Oh my God, yeah. My son told me years ago, he said, time flies when you're having fun. I said, that's a load of hogwash. I said, because after I hit 35, time doesn't care what I'm doing. It just flies.
Flies anyway. It flies without me.
Oh yeah, sometimes it does. You look up and you go, where did it go? You know?
I'll tell you where it went. Jackson Brown gave us the answer. He said in one of his songs, I look back and see where the years have gone. They have all passed under sleep's dark and silent gate. And that's where the years went while we were sleeping.
Absolutely. Well, I haven't. I don't know if I told you. Well, I may have when I saw you in Seattle a few years ago. At that time, it was 3 years ago when you and I talked, and I mentioned a certain public speaker that I used to listen to a lot. And I looked him up and found out he was going to be here in town within just a few weeks, and I went to see him. And now his some of his daughters have actually adopted me. I'm now Uncle Jeff to them, so it's pretty cool to be in and know some of those people in some of the upper echelon in the speaking business that we do. And I'm getting around and getting my name out there and being able to associate with people like yourself. I think this is going to be good. And this podcast, that's what I really want to do, is let people know that you're the one that's responsible. Don't be blaming others. And if you take accountability, it will make all the changes in your life that you're looking for. So,
And if you follow that path and you stay accountable and responsible, good things happen.
oh, absolutely. That's what I tell people all the time. There's only 4 things in this world you're in control of: what you think, how you feel, what you say, and what you do. That's it. You can't make other people do things. And I'd say, well, sometimes you can make them, but the law enforcement frowns on rope and duct tape. Not a good
Pretty
choice.
solid. Sounds like a chair that you need to sit on with all 4 legs.
Oh, absolutely. That's what I tell people a lot of times, though. When you look at things like a 3-legged stool, if you're not pulling your weight, me, myself, and I, if one of them's not pulling their weight, that thing's going to fall over. So you got to be careful and be accountable for that too. So, Mark, thank you so much for your time today, brother. I appreciate it, and I will let you know ahead of time when this version of this episode is going to drop online, so you maybe can promote it out to your people as well. And I look forward to seeing you again soon.
Make it a great day unless you have other plans.
Oh, absolutely, man. All right. Oh,